I've been walking with my face turned to the sun, weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep it on. I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in my bones. Well, children, where there's so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North, all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I've borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's this thing they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then that little man in black over there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they is asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you hearing me. And now old Surgeon ain't got nothing more to say.
Wow. Sorry, that was a pause for applause, even though we can't hear it. Thank you, Dr. D. That was an excellent recitation of Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth. So thank you so much again for opening the program. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for zooming in. My name is Ann Fields Monacle, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Tippecanoe Arts Federation, the presenter of tonight's program entitled United and Uplifted, Voices of Change. The history of the past is but one long struggle upward toward equality. And we hope tonight serves several purposes. We wish to celebrate the 101st anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And tonight we also want to have a special focus on the power of the arts and how song helps unify and give voice to people working for change. We would also like to ensure the voices of all Americans who fought this struggle and those who are currently fighting the good fight are included as well. Before we begin, the Tippecanoe Arts Federation would like to thank Arconic Foundation, who is supporting our Visiting Artist program, which in part is making tonight's program possible, the Greater Lafayette League of Women Voters, Second Baptist Church Lafayette, and especially James Jekyll, who provided musical arrangement and accompaniment on keyboard, as well as Myron McClure, who provided sound engineer expertise on several recordings that you will see tonight. The Younger Women's Task Force chapter of Greater Lafayette, as well as Ethan Bates, who is our lead engineer here tonight in Rec Room Recording, and as well as Scott Greason, who we are acknowledging as our executive producer. So again, thank you both as they are helping make us look and sound great. So this evening, I'm going to be welcoming my colleagues Audrey Johnson and Dr. Deanna McMillan to our virtual stage to share the history and chronology of women's suffrage through both presentation and song. Later in the program, we will also be hearing from contemporary change makers from the Greater Lafayette League of Women Voters and Melissa Groover from the Greater Lafayette chapter of the Younger Women's Task Force. They will both be presenting in just a few minutes. Closing our program, Dr. Denise Wilson will lead us in a community singing, which we hope inspires you to continue fighting the good fight. One last programming note, this presentation will be recorded and the recording will be made available to you early next week. And with that, I would like to turn the program back over to Audrey Johnson and Dr. D, who are just safely socially distanced 6 feet away from me here in the studio.
And thank you so much for putting this together and for having us tonight. For me personally, it is such an honor to be welcomed into this community. I'm new here and I already feel like home. And it really is an honor to be involved with such a wonderful program full of such wonderfully engaged women. And so what I'm bringing tonight, so I'm a classically trained opera singer, but recently I decided to veer a little bit from the traditional career trajectory of an operatic career. I had lived overseas for many years, and in doing so, I gained a newfound appreciation for America, and I also was just feeling drawn towards using my artistry in a more direct way with audiences. And so when my family and I moved back home stateside, I decided to found my own company called Of the I Sing American Heritage Through Song. So the mission of my company, of the I Sing American Heritage Through Song, is to bring American heritage to life through music with the goal of inspiring, directing the initiative to have more engaged citizenship through the power of song and through the music of our nation. And so the company's inaugural concert is on the women's suffrage movement. And so tonight, as Dr. D and I take you through some of the milestones of that movement, I will be connecting you with some of the historical pieces from that time period and to show their significance and connection with the movement. And so as we start here, so music really played a prominent role in the women's suffrage movement in many different ways. This is certainly something that we can see based on all of the sheet music that's available from that time. So here's just one example, and here's another for you. And, you know, whether people were pro or anti-women's rights, there were certainly a plethora of songs about that. So it really shows that it was on the forefront of people's minds, and it was really what they were engaged with. Something else to keep in mind about this time period is, you know, of course, there was no television or, you know, of course, online streaming at this time. And so the role of the piano in the home was really something that was quite significant. This was really the main source of entertainment for the family. And as they would gather around, the pieces that they were playing were new pieces, you know, bought at the 5 and dime store. And the content that these composers were utilizing was the current social and political events that were going on. And so, seeing how prominently the suffrage movement was featured in these songs shows the social significance of that time. So that's quite interesting. Here's one, taken right off of the newspaper headlines with President Wilson in California, just as one example. And additionally, now let's make sure that it's going here. I want you guys to see this. There we go. So when people did venture outside the home for entertainment and went into the theaters and so forth, this was also a topic that the theater reviews were using in their performances, was equal rights and suffrage. So you can see here, this is just one such example of music of that kind. And so with this kind of music, of course, we have completely new melodies and completely new words, right? So totally new compositions. And in addition to this kind of music, there was also the tradition of writing contrafacts, which you see here the definition is a song that is created by the setting of a new text to a previously written melody. And of course, this is a tradition that is almost as old as songwriting itself. So it's not something that's unique to the suffrage movement. However, it is something that was definitely used very strategically by these suffragists in a couple of different ways. And here's just one example of a songbook that was from that time period. And here's the table of contents, which I want you guys to see because as you can see here in brackets after each of the songs is the melody that the song is supposed to be sung to, that the new words are supposed to be sung to. And you can imagine how much that freed up and facilitated ease of learning, right? So very quick and easy to learn these songs. Everybody already knew the melodies, so it was just a matter of learning the new words. And additionally, this made it a lot easier to print the contents because you didn't have to worry about printing the sheet music. And so it was a lot less complicated and a lot less expensive. So that was wonderful. And of course, the words that were written were words that really motivated these women and these suffragists in the face of all of the challenges that they were experiencing. So it was a very solidifying thing to have these pieces. And additionally, it served as a potential way to persuade people to come to the side of women's rights, because what they would strategically do is select songs that had a very sympathetic and people really had a close connection with. And so by combining new words with these sentimental melodies, they were able to garner this the support and the sympathy for the cause. And so now as we take you into this part of the program, Dr. D and I will share some milestones. They are chronologically in order, although we will be kind of skipping through, some pretty big leaps within the movement. But the idea is to show you some key points within the movement and to relate directly some songs that go with these things, so you can make this connection between how song was able to really support this cause and how it was influenced. So take it away, Dr. D, with Seneca Falls.
Thank you.
Yes.
In 1848, Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and other participants at the inaugural Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls adopt the Declaration of Sentiments, which calls for equality for women and includes a resolution that women should seek the right to vote. The suffrage resolution passes by a narrow margin, helped along by the support of the famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass, an early ally of the women's rights activists.
Absolutely. And so this following song, it is an example of a contrafact, and it's called Keep Woman in Her Sphere. And this is set to the tune of Auld Lang Syne. This piece was very popular at suffrage rallies. It's in multiple editions of song sheafs. And additionally, of course, this melody was very beloved then as it is now. And so that sentimentality for the original melody really helped to garner support and sympathy for the cause. And when we listen to this song, you'll hear that the three different verses are about three different kinds of men that were encountered and their reaction to women's rights. And so certainly when you hear the third verse, it will be very reminiscent of Frederick Douglass's support of women.
I have a neighbor, one of those not very hard to find, who know it all without debate and never change their mind. I asked him what of woman garb, forth from the grog shop come. He squandered all his cash for drink and starved his wife at home. I asked him, should not woman vote? He answered with a sneer, I've taught my wife to know a place, keep woman in her sphere. I met an earnest, thoughtful man not many days ago, who pondered deep all human law, the honest truth to know. I asked him what of woman's rights, the answer came sincere. Her rights are just the same as mine. Let woman choose her sphere.
And I sure love those words. An earnest, thoughtful man he certainly was, Frederick Douglass. So what was going on was that during this time, the women's rights movement was taking off in all different areas of life. And one of the more unexpected ones was that of women's fashion. And so there was the need for a way of having this clothing that was not so binding and that also didn't have so many layers of clothing that women had to deal with, right? I mean, they were just getting so frustrated. There were things to do, and they just could not mobilize themselves in the way that they needed to. And so in 1851, this bloomer craze was sweeping the nation, causing all of these scandals. It was called the costume was called bloomers because it was made famous by Amelia Bloomer, and she was a suffragist herself. She owned a paper, and she actually printed the clothing patterns that women were writing in like crazy, saying, "Oh gosh, I want a pattern for these bloomers. That's going to be so much more easy for me, to deal with." And so that's why it was called the bloomer outfit. But this next piece, it's a parlor song, so a great example of that type of a piece of music. And you'll hear it's a very saucy, tongue-in-cheek response to this bloomer craze.
Bless her heart. Freedom.
Yeah, you
started with the bloomers.
Dear me, what a terrible clatter they raise, because that old gossip Dame Rumor declares with her hands lifted up in amaze that I'm coming out as a bloomer, that I'm coming out as a bloomer. I wonder how often these men must be told when a woman a notion once seizes, however they ridicule, lecture, or scold, she'll do after all as she pleases, she'll do after all as she pleases. They know very well that their own passions change with each little change of the season, but oh, it is monstrous and dreadful and strange, and out of all manner of reason, and out of all manner of reason. If we take a fancy to alter our dress and come out in style a la bloomer, to hear what an outcry they make, I confess, is putting me quite out of humor, is putting me quite out of humor. I'll come out next week in this wide bloomer flat, in a size that I fancy will fright them. I had not intended to go quite to that, but I'll do it now only to spite them, but I'll do it now only to spite them. With my pants a la Turk and my skirts 2 feet long, all fitting of course most completely, these grumblers will own after all they are wrong, and that I in a bloom look sweetly, and that I in a bloom look sweetly, yes, that I in a bloom look sweetly.
A fun song, right? right? Again, super saucy, tongue-in-cheek, all that kind of thing. Here's a picture, and this is actually from a piece of sheet music. This was the cover. So you see that costume that was reflected in what I was wearing. And here is Amelia Bloomer in the middle. She's actually introducing Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Susan B. Anthony. So this was a very famous and fortuitous meeting, which is pretty interesting to know about as well. So again, it's all in fun, right? But did we hear these words about the women being monstrous, dreadful, strange, and out of all manner of reason? I'm trying to click here to vote. Thank you, guys. Okay. So I really want to show you, this was not just, these were not just arbitrary words in here. This was really something that throughout the suffrage movement, women were fighting against this constantly, this either or concept, right? So this is another piece of sheet music here when women go to vote, and you see this is the wife in these, kind of Turkish trousers, right? And she's abandoned her husband to all these kids. Because this idea was that, if you wanted to wear the pants and to vote, that there was something wrong with you, that you weren't a normal woman, you weren't a real woman. Here's again, this is a caricature, a political cartoon from a newspaper. And here's one too. I mean, talk about monstrous and dreadful. Look at this. I mean, this is the kind of thing, this is the feminine Jekyll and Hyde, and this was in a publication as well. So this is the kind of thing that the women were having to deal with. And what they started to realize was, you know what, I'm getting so much more done. I'm so much more comfortable. But is it worth it? Because the scandals that this was causing to the movement, they realized it was doing so much more to hurt their cause with all of these scandals than it was to advance it. And so after thinking about it and weighing the pros and cons, the leaders of the suffrage movement decided, okay, ladies, we're going to have to, in the name of the cause, revert back to this more traditional, binding, and feminine clothing. So very interesting points there. The next area that we are going to talk about a little bit is the suffragists in terms of the Civil War. And so at this point, even though the cause was gaining momentum, the suffragists decided to actually pause their campaigns. And the reason for this was that a lot of them felt that it would actually help the cause more to show women as, loyal, supportive of the troops, that, when they were called to action, that they flew to action for the greater good. Here's a postcard from that era to show that. And so this was their strategy, and certainly it's reflected in songs as well. So the most interesting song that I found in this context is another contrafact. It's called Then and Now, and I'm not sure how well you're able to see, but in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the words for Then and Now. This was a broadside, so this was one of the original sheets that was printed of these words. And we're not sure exactly who this author was of these words. She's just referred to as a lady of the Union Aid Society. And she very strategically dedicated this song to the veterans of Nebraska. And it's a great song. It's a great strategy because the original song was a Civil War ballad called Just Before the Battle, Mother. Everybody knew the song at this time. It was very popular, very sentimental, and it talked about, just before the battle, Mother, I'm thinking most of you. So, Mother, you gave me comfort, and, you raised me so wonderfully well that just before the battle, you're the one that I'm thinking of, right? So it's reinforcing this idea of mothers being there and being, that kind of woman that everybody wants to count on in the home. And so by pairing this melody with these words that were about how well women had nursed and cared for the soldiers during battle, we have this reinforcement of the idea that women can be feminine. They can be good mothers, good wives, contributors to society, and they're deserving of the vote, and that's not a threat to men in that way. And so this is Then and Now.
Worn and weary, sick and fainting, fixed upon a bed of pain, lay the soldier sadly musing, home afar and comrades slain. It was woman's voice consoling, heard amid war's dreadful doom. Woman with her touch of healing, moving noiseless through the gloom. Cheer up, brothers, we are coming. Hope and help we bring to you. woman's fair. Gone is woman's voice of pity. Consolation turns to prayer. Pleads she now the boon of freedom, right to join the enfranchised band, right to equal place with brothers in her home and native land. Cheer up, sisters, they are coming. Hope and help they bring to you. Never shall we say that free men failed to free their sisters too.
And in 1896, a group of women, including Harriet Tubman, Frances E.W. Harper, Ida B. Wells Barnett, and Mary Church Terrell, among others, formed the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, NACWC. In addition to women's enfranchisement, listen to this, the organization advocates for equal pay, educational opportunities, job training, and access to child care for Black women, issues that we're dealing with still today. This song, If I Can Help Somebody, made famous by Mahalia Jackson, reflects the ways in which these women came together to help each other as we do today and their communities. I hope you enjoy it.
If I can help somebody as I travel along, if I can help somebody with a word or a song, if I can help somebody from doing wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. Hey, no, my living shall not be in vain. Hey, if I can help somebody as I'm singing this song, then my living shall not, then my living shall not, then my living shall not be in vain.
In the early 1900s, African American women fighting for the right to vote continued to face discrimination from white suffragists, especially as the latter group seeks support in the southern states. In 1901 and 1903, the Nassau Conventions in Atlanta and New Orleans bar Black suffragists from attending. Audrey?
Thank you. Yes, and so As we skip forward to 1920, to Tennessee and the 19th Amendment ratification, so at this point, the cause really had gained momentum across the country. This was increasing in the press and across all media platforms, especially in the theaters. And so the following song, it's a ragtime piece. So think about this. We started with things like Bloomer's Complaint that sounded almost Victorian in style. Now we're all the way to ragtime. So thinking about what that means in terms of how long the suffrage movement really did go on. And here's the sheet music for this song, She's Good Enough to Be Your Baby's Mother. And just consider, the strategy that they've used here. So we have a very young, very attractive young lady on the cover. And as you listen to the song, you'll hear, it's very lilting, very feminine in style. Also no accident, right? We're still fighting against those stereotypes that it's this either or situation of if you want to vote, you're not a real woman and whatever that means, So these things are all very present. And in the text, certainly the argument that this song, I think, very strategically puts forward is if women are good enough to give our nation our most important heroes, how are we then not also worthy of the vote?
No man is greater than his mother. No man is half so good. No man is greater than the wife he loves. She's there to guide him, whatever betide him. She's good enough to love you and adore you. She's good enough to bear your troubles for you. And if your tears were falling today, nobody else would wipe them away. She's good enough to fill your heart with kisses when you are lonesome and blue. She's good enough to be your baby's mother, and she's good enough to vote with you. Man plunged the world in war and madness. She must protest in vain. Let's hope and pray one day we hear her say, stop all this sadness, I bring you gladness. She's good enough to give you old Abe Lincoln. She's good enough to give you Benny Franklin, Ulysses Grant, and Washington too. She was so true, she gave them to you. She's good enough to give you Teddy Roosevelt, Thomas A. Edison too. She's good enough to give you Woodrow Wilson. And she's good enough to vote with you.
And so certainly in the suffrage movement, I would say the most important or most notable story of motherly influence is that of Feb Byrne. This is Feb, and her son Harry. So at this point, we have the amendment that's it's out for ratification, and at that point we need 36 of the then 48 states. And so here's the suffrage map, and you can see everybody in yellow has already ratified. Then we've got all these states in red, and these states were either ones that had officially opposed it in their own, state senates and houses, or they were not interested in having a special session. And so at this point, we are, it's the summer of 1920. We have the November 1920 presidential election coming up. And so it's really all come down to Tennessee as the potential deciding vote for ratification of this amendment.
So Tennessee, the legislature was called into special session. The Tennessee legislators meet to decide the fate of the women's suffrage amendment. Cat and other prominent national suffs traveled to Nashville to personally lobby legislators for weeks, as do anti-suffs, determined to keep women from gaining the vote. In the so-called War of the Roses, supporters of suffrage wear white roses while their opponents don red ones. The Tennessee Senate votes to ratify, but the vote is tied in the House until one legislator, Harry Byrne, changes his vote after receiving a letter from his mother urging him to vote for women's suffrage. On August 18th, 1920, one day after North Carolina legislature rejects the suffrage amendment by 2 votes, Tennessee becomes the 36th state to ratify. And on August 26th, U.S. Secretary of State Bainbridge Colby certifies the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gives all American women the right to vote for the first time in history. And in November, more than 8 million American women cast their vote in the presidential election. These voters included many black women, although many others were prevented from voting by discriminatory laws, intimidation, and other tactics of disenfranchisement.
Absolutely. And so, of course, although this was the historic milestone that's worthy of celebration and recognition, at that time, our work was not over, and over 100 years later, we still have a long ways to go. This final selection that we will share with you right now is another contrafact, and the melody for it is one you'll all recognize. It's the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and so this is the suffrage battle hymn of sorts. And I hope that the words come across clearly for you. I can say that for me personally, I feel that the third verse is a call to action, and that's what's needed in order to make the first verse true for everyone.
There's a priceless proclamation to the daughters of the race, with co-equal rights and honors, and with equal power and place. And it bears the stamp of justice and the seal of heavenly grace, as truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, as truth is marching on. It's our right to serve our nation in its every hour of need. It's our right to cast the ballot on our country's laws and creeds, and to show that by the lawful execution of these deeds, that truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. That truth is marching on. Our foremothers were true patriots in their fight for liberty, and we've had the women's right to vote for this past century. Now their legacy lives on in us. It's up to you and me to keep truth marching on. Oh, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, to keep truth marching on and on.
In 1924, 4 years after the 19th Amendment is ratified, passage of the Snyder Act, aka the Indian Citizenship Act, makes Native Americans U.S. citizens for the first time. Can you believe it? But many Native American women and men are still effectively barred from voting for the next 4 decades until Utah became the last state to extend full voting rights to Native Americans in 1962. And then in 1965, the Voting Right Act, after a century of struggle by Black women and men against poll taxes, literacy tests, and other discriminatory state voting laws, President Lyndon B. Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act into law on August 6, 1965, the biggest legislative achievement of the civil rights movement. The bill protects all citizens' right to vote under the 14th and the 15th Amendments. And now I'd like to share with you, as the struggle continues, some of what we're doing here in this area, the Greater Lafayette League of Women Voters. And as we review some of the things that we're doing in the community, I invite you to consider membership. And this membership, I will add, is available to women and men, as you'll see in some of the pictures. And we have some very active men, including our very own Mayor, John Dennis. Continuing the work of the founding mothers to register women to vote, the Greater Lafayette League today is very focused on not only registering all eligible voters, but also assuring that Hoosiers can check their registration status and learn about candidate stances through its Vote 411 website. For the 2020 election in November, the League expanded our efforts to register voters by initiating the Tippecanoe Voting Alliance, by bringing together other organizations interested in registering voters, including the ACLU, the NAACP, Pride, the Indiana Black Expo, and Greater Lafayette Indivisible. We were able to register hundreds of new voters with particular emphasis placed on Purdue students. This is not only including the staffing registration tables throughout the fall, but also undertaking a lively advertising campaign in the Purdue Exponent. Another effort to get out the vote for the November election was to organize and present over 21 candidate interviews ranging from judges to school board candidates. As we enter our 101st year, we focus on the three program areas that are our priorities. And when I say our, I mean the leagues nationally: environmental sustainability, redistricting, and voting. A very active portion of our membership here locally are strong advocates with the Indiana State Legislature around bills that affect Indiana's ecological systems. Redistricting continues as a key focus because until we stop gerrymandering, it will be difficult to have districts that fairly represent all constituents. And our annual legislative forum that happens to take place this Saturday virtually provides voters with the opportunity to ask questions of our state representatives. So as we zoom along in the new year, it's apparent that our mission, empowering voters, defending democracy, continues to lead our efforts. So I invite you to go to our page, our local League of Women Voters page, and register yourself into any activity we have upcoming. Right now, we are doing virtual opportunities throughout this area and all across the state. So I welcome you to joining us as we move on to Denise's portion. Will she lead us in community song?
Oh, before that, actually, we got to hold up because we have the Younger Women's Task Force here tonight.
That's right.
Yeah, we have Mel who's joining us, and they would like me. They've made this amazing just introductory video that I think sums up what they've been doing really well. And then Mel, right after that's done, we'll invite you to tell us just a little bit more about how you guys are advocating for change.
Fantastic.
YWTF is a community of people that want to do something that matters together. We believe in the power of direct action to change our communities and transform them into spaces that are safe for even the most vulnerable. So direct action can look like so many different things. Every year we read hundreds of bills that our legislators put forward and decide which of those are important to us and how we're going to fight them at the State House or how we're going to support them in the streets. We make phone calls, we're at rallies, we're directly meeting with grassroots leaders in our community to change culture. No matter who you are, you can be a member of YWTF, whether you've historically had power in this country, you might decide to be a solidarity member and join us in reading bills, join us in celebrating all of our wins, but you can also become an activist member. So there's lots of ways to engage and plug in YWTF. All of our members of color have a space in the collective, and we take advantage of the Replenish Fund, which is a way that folks can develop their activist and organizing skills. If you want to join us, all you have to do is email ywtfgreaterlafayette@gmail.com and someone will reach out to you.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I apologize if I look a little rough and ready. We have our weekly action hour every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. So I shot on over here and didn't have a chance to put on my lipstick. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm our director of organizing for the Younger Women's Task Force. You just heard from our director of policy. And the only thing that I'll just say and underscore what she's up to when she's saying that in that video is, for us, we're committed to thinking about how those most affected by the issues are those that should be leading the change in those issues. And so for us, we organize around the issues that matter to us, and we have the audacity to believe that we're the experts of our own lives, and that we get to build our power and put pressure on those that can give us what we want in order to give us what we want. So we do that a lot of different ways, and we look good while we're doing it. And in a long-standing tradition of women, non-binary, and trans folks organizers throughout history. So if you want to be a part of YWTF, you can find us on the internet and sometimes in the streets. You know, a lot of those pictures were taken before the pandemic, but I'm reporting live from our HQ, telling you that we're really excited to be doing really good work in our community, and we invite everybody to join us in that. And the next way you can do so is you can get on board with our weekly action hours. So every Thursday at 5:30, we make calls and get people to make calls into our state house on the bills that matter to us for our legislative priorities. And there's a lot of voting bills that come through, and a lot of other bills too. So it's great to be here, and this is a great event. And now I'll turn it to Denise, who's gonna make sure that we all are taking part in co-creating this time together through song. Thanks.
Again, I'm Denise Wilson, and I think that Anne probably invited me to be part of the program this evening. Not because I like to sing and do some singing and playing around town, but more for my role as the director of Blue Moon Rising, which is a sort of a very inclusive community choir that doesn't matter if you've sung before or have had no experience or read music, everyone is welcome. And it's not just that we get together and sing, which is very magical when it's not Zoom time or when it's not COVID times. We are meeting on Zoom now, but it's not quite the same. But I think more when Anne thought of me, it was for the singing that we do in our community, to be a voice for progressive change, for singing at things like the science rally that we had right after Trump was elected in 2016, to sing at the Lafayette Urban Ministries Thanksgiving dinner. Just whatever ways our voices together can just send a message of sort of, we care, we see you, those of you who need to be seen, who need to be heard. There's so many times during the program tonight, I thought, for women's suffrage and so many movements that have come since then, it's people saying, please hear us, please see us. Understand who we are and what we need, and and care and take some action. And I know just from seeing some of the pictures and names on the screen, so many of you are in your own ways for the things you are most passionate about, giving your time and energy and parts of your life to making all kinds of different positive change. I'm going to sing you a little snippet of a song before we sing something together. And this is an example of some of us white song leaders don't quite know how it is that our voices or the songs we have sung can maybe be part of or supportive of the movements of other peoples for justice, for different kinds of freedom, to be seen and heard. And this is a woman from Minnesota, Katie Ty Warren, who wrote this short little song, and she calls it the Protection March. And she said she wrote it late last summer when she was thinking, she was inspired to try to get white folk to step up, stop using their white privilege to be invisible when the going gets rough. So not so much to be the leaders, but to say, hey, we are here and we support you. So this little song that she sang, it's time to protect each other, 1, 2, 3, you and me. It's time to respect each other, 1, 2, 3, you and me. And we will not be afraid, and we will not turn away. It's time to protect each other, 1, 2, 3, you and me. It's time to respect each other, 1, 2, 3, you and me. And we will not be afraid, and we will not turn away. So there's just a little example of sort of a voice that's saying, we're here, we're listening. Let us know how we can not turn away. I want to sing another song, mostly because I know that most of you, or many of you at least, will know this song. It's it's been around for decades. It's by Holly Near, which she wrote back in 1979. It's called Singing for Our Lives. And she sang it she wrote the song right after the murder of Harvey Milks when he, in San Francisco, when he was murdered for no reason other than probably the fact that he was gay, and he was, again, audacious enough to run for office and actually win. But after that, she wrote this song, and the first verse is, "We are a gentle, angry people." And I love the way that she puts the two words together. We usually don't hear gentle and angry together. But I think, it's no accident. She didn't write this on a whim or without, really thinking about it. And also the title, We Are Singing for Our Lives. And though this was written decades ago, how many times before that time or since that time could people, different groups of people, threatened in so many different ways, have sung this? And whether you're singing literally for our life, like life and death, or whether you are singing for the life that you want to live and be able, like a flower to blossom and not have those walls between you and who you can be in front of you. So I'm going to make one little change on her song, and normally I don't do this lightly, but when she wrote it, she wrote, "We are gay and straight together." And I think in this time, I would just like to sing, "We are a land of many genders." And at the beginning of each verse, I'm just gonna, when you know the first line, you know the whole verse. You'll catch on after I've sung the first verse. But, and I can see some of you, and I can see your names in the other black boxes there. Whether I can see you or not, I hope at home you will sing along and think of all of the people who you would like to hear this song, and all of the people who need their voices to be heard. And we'll be gentle, angry people together here. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. Oh, we are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are young and old together. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many genders. We are a land of many genders, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many genders, and we are singing for our lives. We are gentle, loving people. We need to be gentle and angry and loving for sure. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our lives. Oh, we are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our lives. And we are singing for our lives. Thank you, and thank all of you for turning your faces on so I can see you moving and singing along. And again, the name of the group I sing with is Blue Moon Rising, but when COVID is history, I love having just one-time sings in a park or beautiful space in our town and just singing with whoever wants to show up. So thank you all for the work that you are doing. And we have one last song to close out the program. And we're going to hear both Audrey and Deanna singing a song we can also sing at least parts of with, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Dr. D, would you like to say anything about this before you play the last song?
Okay, well, Lift Every Voice and Sing was written in 1905 in celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday by brothers James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson. And this was an integral selection in the African American suffrage and women's clubs hymnals. And I can say personally, when we grew up in public school, we had assembly, and that was the opportunity for us to get together. And after we sang the Star Spangled Banner, we had the opportunity of singing what's now the Black National Anthem, then the Negro National Anthem, as a sign of solidarity. This song was the official song of the NAACP. But I want to tell you that when Audrey approached me, she asked me, would it be okay to sing one verse of the song? And that was my opportunity for us to join forces as song sisters. And so this is our rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing. I hope it will be as uplifting and as unifying to you as it was to us. And I want to also thank, my church, Second Baptist Church, and my musical director, James Deacle, for making this special arrangement. So it's not quite up to the operatic par of my esteemed colleague here, but we had so much fun singing this together. And as Denise shared, we can join together with whatever song that we sing. We can join together as a community. So I hope that we can take this song as the beginning of our unified movement forward in the greater Lafayette area. Thank you for joining us, and bless you all.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun upon your day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast.
God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by thy might led us
the places, our God, where we met thee. Last our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God.